On September 10, 2021, Maddie Joy Langlois sent written email communications to the victim wherein she maliciously threatened injury to the victim or another, injure the victim's reputation, and expose the victim to disgrace, with the intent to extort pecuniary advantage, i.e. obtaining public records with which there was an associated lawful cost, or with intent to compel the threatened person to do an act against the victim's will, i.e. transmit public records prior to receiving the payment associated with production of the records, violation of Florida statute, section 636.05. On September 10, 2021, your affiant was notified by the victim of an incident involving the defendant identified as Maddie Joy Langlois, white female, date of birth 6/6/72. According to the victim had been dealing with a complaint from the defendant. Your affiant learned that the defendant had been in communication with MCSO personnel beginning on August 19, 2021 regarding a public records request. The defendant's request pertained to an incident on August 18, 2021, MCSO incident number 2108180600, during which the defendant was seen suspiciously videotaping a FedEx facility. Part of the defendant's public records request was fulfilled, but the defendant's request for a copy of the non-emergency telephone call pertaining to the incident was unable to be met because a technological related issue resulted in some calls, including the call related to the incident, not being recorded. The defendant threatened legal action against MCSO. Accordingly, the victim became involved in handling the defendant's complaints. On August 26, the victim sent the defendant an email advising that MCSO did not have a recording of the call and provided detailed information regarding the technological malfunction. At that point, the victim and defendant exchanged several emails regarding the defendant's public records request. The email address used by the defendant was contact.corner@yahoo.com, and the emails were signed Maddie Langlois. On September 2nd, the defendant made a second public records request to the victim, this time seeking all communications related to her first public records request. The victim began working to fulfill the request and asked MCSO's IT department to retrieve all emails that were responsive to the request. It took the IT department 75 minutes to retrieve all 292 emails responsive to the request, and it took an additional 30 minutes to retrieve the emails for confidential or exempt information. The victim sent the defendant an email advising that the records were ready to be released to her, but due to the voluminous nature of the request, she would have to pay a fee in the amount of $45.44 for pickup or $47.71 for mailing. The victim's email to the defendant included a reference to the statutory authority for the fee, brackets Florida statute 119.07 brackets 4 brackets A1, as well as detailed invoice showing how the fee was calculated and an explanation that the records had to be mailed or picked up because the file was too large to be sent via email. Your affiant reviewed the aforementioned emails and noted that the defendant's responses to the victim repeatedly stated that she was demanding the records by the end of the day, which culminated in a series of emails on September 10, 2021. On that date, at 10:02 a.m., the defendant sent the victim the following email. I am not going to pay you any money whatsoever for these records. You are proving to me that the call I ordered was indeed not recorded. The public records demand is not negotiable and is mandatory for you to email to me. Make it happen by the end of the day. You are going to prove to me what you said is true. You don't have a choice. You will do this one way or another. Keep violating my constitutional rights and find out how expensive it can get for you in court. Not just court in the legal section, the court of public opinion as well. I have absolutely no problem destroying this sheriff and administration publicly. You messed with the wrong one. I have been doing this on purpose. Scumbags like you think that it's okay to mess with the people that you don't think can back it up. I never asked you to do this. I told you you were going to do this, and you will. I will get these records for free, one way or another. I don't care if I have to drag your reputation through the mud to do it. I'm going to make sure that the public knows how corrupt you are. I'm not even going to sue for these records. I have no intentions of suing you. I'm going to destroy your reputation to the point where you could never show your face in public without embarrassment again. And with you, because you pick on people with mental illness, family and kids are not out of the ring. I'm going to come up with nicknames that will catch on to you and your family. Any kids, grandkids or anybody with your name going to schools going to get picked on. You pay off the courts. I definitely accuse you of that. I think that you're only confident because you know I would have to appeal it to the 11th Circuit and I don't have $80,000. So that's fine. But I bet you I can make you hate me far more than you can make me hate you. I didn't even do this to Deloach, but I'll make an exception in your case. I love the First Amendment. Let me take you to school on the First Amendment. Signed, Maddie Langlois. 5 minutes later at 10:07 a.m, the defendant sent the victim another email stating, "You should have seen how much Deloach's kids were harassed when I came out with Sheriff Gator Roach. His kids are now being called roaches in school, LOL, and that was after I asked people not to do it. Have a great day." Then at 10:14 a.m, the defendant sent the victim another email advising she would give the victim until the close of business today to email her all of the records. Her email further threatened that if the victim did not comply with her demands, she would reach out to people like Rogue Nation, Rights Crispy, Big Nick South Florida Accountability, High Desert Community Watch, and more than likely her good friend Jeff Gray to help her prove that you don't need to be to make your point. The defendant clarified that she could easily beat the victim in court, but the victim won't learn anything from that. The defendant stated she loved these games and that the victim's family will definitely be aware when they go to school. Hell, I might even write a rap tune with some really catchy hooks about your name. This is going to be fun. I'm going to make a lot of money off of this. I doubt that you will follow through and do what you're supposed to do, but I will give you till 5 o'clock to do it. I'm a very fair person. That afternoon, based upon the defendant's statements that she would destroy the victim's reputation, along with the threatening comments towards the victim's family, the victim and your affiant attempted to conduct a recorded controlled phone call to the defendant. The number dialed was a phone number that the defendant had previously used to contact the victim about her public records request, brackets 352 318 1957. The defendant did not answer the phone. However, the defendant called back at approximately 3:35 p.m, at which time a recorded controlled phone call was successfully conducted under your affiant's direction and also under the authority/direction of the victim. The following is a brief summary of the recorded call. The defendant initially stated that the whole request for information came from her attempting to make a positive story about MCSO, and it blew up into this. She indicated that she wanted the emails of every conversation related to her inquiry to quell her fears, and considered this to be destruction of evidence. The defendant indicated that she was not going to pay for the records and MCSO had to give her the records for free. During the controlled phone calls, the defendant confirmed her identity as Maddie Langlois and acknowledged sending the written communications, brackets emails. The defendant expressed her belief that if she sued the victim would make money because of something. So she is instead going to go the dirty route. When asked by the victim about her claims to destroy the victim's reputation, the defendant stated, "You better believe it. I'm going to ruin you and the sheriff. And if you don't supply the information for free, I don't care what happens to you and your family. I'm going to harass. I'm going to ruin you. I'm going to ruin you. I'm going to ruin you." The victim also read an excerpt of the defendant's email, where she threatened the victim with not being able to show the victim's face in public without embarrassment. The defendant acknowledged sending the communication and replied, "Maybe you better take somebody seriously." At one point in the conversation, the defendant suggested that the victim should pay the fees for producing the records, and if not, she will have to act accordingly. The defendant stated that she would post videos about the victim on YouTube. She claimed that her channel had 20,000 subscribers and some of her videos have 1 million views. The defendant stated, "There's no way to stop it once the wildfire kicks. There's no way to stop it. Once it goes and it goes viral, there's nothing I can do." The defendant stated that she doesn't care what happens to the victim or the victim's family, and again referenced that this is how it caught on to Gator DeLoach's kids. This is clearly a reference to an earlier email in which the defendant claimed to have ruined Putnam County Sheriff DeLoach's reputation, resulting in the humiliation of his children at school. In essence, the defendant implied that the same fate would befall the victim's children should the victim fail to comply with her demands. To confirm this, the victim asked the defendant, "If I don't give you the records, you're going to take steps?" Where it's reasonably foreseeable to you because it happened before, that something would happen where my reputation would be destroyed and my family would be harassed. To which the victim replied, "That's the outcome that happens." The victim then asked the defendant if the victim were to give her the records for free, if the defendant would promise not to come after the victim's family or destroy the victim's reputation, to which the defendant confirmed, "I promise not to come after you. I would never go after the family and kids on purpose." The defendant stated that she does not target family members, but it was one of the inevitable outcomes of her actions. The victim then asked the defendant if the victim's family would be collateral damage, to which the defendant replied, "Yeah, pretty much. That's the way it happens, man. I mean, nicknames and stuff like that, and you know it happens." The defendant further advised if she targets a person and they get the collateral damage, it is because you didn't do what you were supposed to do. As the recorded conversation continued, the victim asked the defendant multiple times and in different ways about the defendant's threat to go after the victim's reputation and family. The defendant stated that she is coming after the victim's rep and advised, "I'm going to destroy you and the sheriff. Next election, you won't be there, dude." Toward the end of the controlled phone call, the victim confronted the defendant more directly about her written threats. The defendant claimed that the victim was trying to frame the defendant for blackmail, made multiple excuses about how her actions were not blackmail, and then hung up on the victim. Shortly after the controlled phone call, the defendant sent a series of emails to the victim in which she continued to threaten the victim's reputation. The victim received a total of 12 emails from the defendant between 4:23 p.m. on Friday, September 10th, shortly after the controlled phone call ended, and 7:25 p.m. on Saturday, September 11th. In the first email to the victim after the controlled phone call sent at 4:23 p.m, the defendant wrote, "You show me your true intentions and think that I'm not going to retaliate? Nice try. Now I'm going to expose you for what you are." Later that same day at 7:50 p.m, the defendant sent the victim an email in which she advised that she enlisted the help of several other individuals in her efforts to injure the victim and the victim's reputation. The defendant listed the individuals by their aliases or pseudonyms: Acura Amanda and American Amy, and they are all on board and are contacting Big Nick South Florida Accountability, Jay Surreal, a bunch of us to say at the least. The defendant also clarified in this email that her intent was to engage in extrajudicial acts by stating, "I'm going to destroy you and your reputation. You should consider yourself lucky. Another individual is getting sued." At 9:30 p.m, the defendant sent an email to the victim which contained a YouTube link and the words "Game On." The link routed to the defendant's YouTube channel, which had been renamed Maddie Madness RIPs. It should be noted that prior to September 10th, the defendant's YouTube channel was simply titled Maddie Madness. The name change and the communication of such to the victim evidences as additional threat to the victim. Although the video post settings were changed to allow private viewing only before your affiant was able to view it, the fact that the defendant wrote "Game On" and sent the link to the victim strongly indicates that the defendant has or plans to use YouTube as a platform to broadcast content that is harmful to the victim's reputation. An email from the defendant sent to the victim at 11:27 p.m. on September the 10th contained statements such as, "When I get done with you, you're going to be ashamed of showing your face in public. I'm going to make sure that your name is dragged through the mud. And I already have some really catchy catchphrases that I hope will become viral on your name." In an email sent on Saturday, September 11th at 12:54 a.m, the defendant stated, "What's really funny is even if you provided the records, I was still going to do this. And even if the victim gave the records in person with an apology, it's all too late." The defendant further advised she had nothing better to do than drag the victim through the mud. Based upon the totality of the circumstances, your affiant believes that sufficient probable cause has been developed to believe that the defendant did make a written communication to the victim, and in that communication the defendant threatened to injure the reputation of the victim, expose the victim to disgrace, as well as the family members of the victim, and did make these threats maliciously with the intent to gain pecuniary advantage (production of the records without payment), or compel the victim to do an act against the victim's will (deliver public records prior to receiving the payment associated with their production). Lastly, the defendant intended that the threat be communicated to the victim. Your affiant will request that the defendant be held on a no bond status for the following reasons. The defendant lives in Putnam County and does not appear to have any ties to Marion County. The defendant was arrested for one count of intercepting oral communications on December 18, 2020 in St Johns County, case number 2020-CF-1719. The defendant posted bond on December 21, 2020 and was released from custody. The case is still open and active. Consequently, the defendant was out on pre-trial release at the time he committed the offence in the instant case. The defendant enlisted third parties that use aliases pseudonyms to aid her in the commission of her criminal activity. The fact that these third parties use aliases indicates their desire to engage in acts that they do not want traced back to them. Unless the defendant is held in custody, her communications and directions to the third parties cannot be monitored, which significantly increases the probability of intimidation and danger to the victim.